Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Lesley Ferkins tōku ingoa. Hi everyone, my name is Lesley Ferkins and I am a professor in sport leadership and governance at AUT, Auckland University of Technologies. I'm actually based at the AUT Sports Performance Research Institute, which is a very cool research institute that coalesces around making a difference in the sports sector through a whole range of different research programs, whether it be sports science or organisational or coaching. So that's where I emanate from, and I am going to be talking about collaborative governance in sport.
Hi, I'm Makingadifference. Welcome to Governancebites, and as you just heard, today I have the pleasure of spending time with Professor Lesley Ferkins. Professor, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate your expertise in this because, as you say, you are a professor of sport. Your expertise or your direction of research is largely around sports management, right, and governance and self-management. So the topic of the day is around, as you said, collaborative governance. Can I start by asking you to explain what you mean by collaborative governance?
Yeah, sure. And as you'll imagine when you're talking to an academic, what we'll say usually is that it's a contested term, which kind of just means, there's lots of different interpretations, and the word collaborative is not, it's a bit ubiquitous. There's collaborative, there's collaborations going on everywhere and in every sector and every place. But we have decided to coin it and put it in the context of collaborative governance in sport, or in fact, more latterly, we've decided to call it collaborative sport governance, which for us, the people that have been researching in this area and looking at how this works, for us it is about organisations coming together to work in partnership in the governance context. So in many of the Western sports systems around the world, we've got the federated sports structures, meaning we've got national, regional or club, or in Australia we've got national, state, regional, club. Yes. Same in the UK, same in many Western contexts. Canada's another one like that. So we've got this kind of federated system, and sport kind of reflects that, the way that sport is organised. And led in terms of the organisations reflects that. So that means, for example, tennis in New Zealand. Tennis New Zealand is the national body, but then it has 6 regional entities. Actually, it's just gone through a restructure, but let's say, for argument's sake, it's got 6 regional entities. Used to be more, and now it's we're opening up that too. And then there are a whole bunch of different clubs, 400 or 500 different clubs, but each of those are separate legal entities, responsible for their own mission and vision and direction, while also working, with the system of others around them. But there's my patch, your patch. Who are you to tell us what to do? Kind of sentiments. And so the idea of collaborative governance is we might be separate legal entities and responsible for the governance of our own legal entity, but we certainly need to be doing that with a really close mind to the whānau that we sit within, which is the wider sport organisations.
Right. So primarily they're in around federated sport structures, not so much across codes.
That's how we've been researching and using it, and you could absolutely apply it in those other ways, but that's how we've picked it up and been using it. Right,
that makes sense. What are the critical success factors for effective collaborative governance in the federated sports context?
So, while collaborative sport governance, the way that we've been using it and kind of defining it and arguing for it and therefore promoting for the use of it, it essentially is trying to encourage the notion of let's work in partnership and together, but it also pushes back a little bit, albeit subtly, on the idea that we just need to collapse all of those different legal entities in one sport because there's way too many and we're all fighting. We actually collapse them all into one, and there just needs to be one national body that takes over and does everything. In our research, in our understanding, that's might be considered utopia. it kind of doesn't reflect the reality of what we actually have. We actually have a whole bunch of committed volunteers who are working at the local level and don't want to be kind of collapsed into one entity and driven by a national agenda. They're there because they connect with the local. So the collaborative sport governance opportunity is to enable the individual legal entities to retain their own sense of identity and the social capital that sits within, i.e. the volunteer base, but to think about okay, but we can't just do that in isolation. We do sit within a family, a whānau, and in a system, and we need to think about how we formally can collaborate in our governance thinking and structures.
Yeah, and that federation, I think, is exacerbated in New Zealand by our funding models too, because quite often the regional, the trusts that the gaming trusts and so forth are very regional themselves. And if you've got a national entity trying to apply for money from a regional trust, that's not our space.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
What are the most common pitfalls or challenges that you see in collaborative governance models within sport?
Pitfalls and challenges. I think it's that the arguments against it are that it doesn't progress and advance on the challenges that we faced in our patch protection behaviour.
Yes.
And so, if it's used as a way to just continue to stay strong and parochial and, push back against having to, be part of a family member, then, that is one of its pitfalls. Because the other side of that argument is the unitary system, the nationalised, centralised. But collaborative governance seeks to not throw the baby out with the bathwater. But there is some, how does that metaphor work? There is some bathwater that needs to be reduced or let go of, maybe the dirty bathwater. As one of those family members, you do need to figure out how you're going to work with the other family members. So you do need to not just think about your own patch and be parochial and consider your own organisation. You do need to think about yourself in relation to others.
Yes.
It's based on the premise that, together we can achieve more, which could be utopia, but seems pretty reasonable.
Yes, absolutely. Over a decade ago now, maybe 15 years ago, I remember working in the sport area, doing a lot of courses with Spark as it was then, and meeting people from other sports on those courses, and one sport with which you're well familiar, talking about the parochialism of two of the entities were very, very strong, and coming to the national governance level, fighting for what they wanted individually, and everyone else be damned. I think, are you noticing more of a movement away from those old representative structures of here's our president, here's our secretary, here's our treasurer, and here are the representatives from our various regions, which led to that kind of behaviour, right? Are we moving away from that now? Are we moving to proper board structures?
Yeah, absolutely. And New Zealand Rugby was kind of one of the last bastions of that in its recent governance review, and I think one of the things about collaborative governance that it seeks to not throw the baby out with the bathwater, and that it seeks to appreciate the value of the social capital of people who are so invested that they'll come, with their region or their club's best interests at heart, and they'll want to fight for that. So, that's also a value, but it's a value that can be a problem in the context of a broader system and networked approach. Over the years, that representative model of board appointments or board representation, if you like, has evolved, and now most national sport organisations have what we understood to be a hybrid composition. So we've got roughly maybe between 40 and 60% either way of appointed people that sit on boards through a board appointments panel and a skills matrix, and the other half, or 60-40 kind of percentage, being those that might come from within the sport. And I say that very carefully. I don't say representatives of. They come from within the sport. In other words, they are there to think and act and offer the lived experience on behalf of their experience within the sport, and not from a particular region.
Yes.
But they may have come from a particular region, but they're there to help with the sporting knowledge
Yes.
Per se across the national landscape.
And of course, we are moving to a model under the 2022 Incorporated Societies Act, where the majority of members of the board have to be members of the sport, right, or of the Incorporated Society. So that may impact that model, as you suggested.
Yeah. Although it's not really that hard to become a member.
No, that's true. And it's also, I think, quite often that's the flip side. It's trying to get board representatives who are not members to take enough interest in the sport to be involved, particularly in the minority sport space. To when you're trying to get skills and expertise and fresh thinking, it can be really hard to get them. And everyone, even the appointed ones, tend to be members anyway. How do you balance the need for centralised strategic direction for the national body with the autonomy and the specific needs of those regional bodies? How do you make that work in collaborative governance?
Balancing the need for centralised strategic direction with in the federated system, and I suppose that is, in a nutshell, exactly what collaborative governance seeks to do. We use it in a kind of a formalised way. Governance is a formalised set of legal procedures, and we use it in a formalised sense. In that collaborative governance means that your legal entity, who you are responsible for and have to think and act on behalf of and mitigate risk for, needs to work in tandem with our legal entity, where we have the same directors' responsibilities. But in the middle, there's an overlap for, there's a sweet spot where there are some things that we have common interest. So how can we, what is it that we can collaborate on? So one of the things that Tennis New Zealand did in its collaborative governance processes is, first of all, start with identifying the roles and responsibilities of each of the legal entities in the system. So the national body, can do some really cool things in the long-term strategic direction side of things. The regions are really good at delivering events and tournaments and facilities. That's your patch, that's your strengths. Maybe the national body can take responsibility for the high performance policies, perhaps, or strategies. That kind of the roles and responsibilities and ways that we can work to our strengths and work with each other in different.
So there's an element there of getting clarity of role, of what's the national organisation there to do, and then what are the regional organisations there to do and the individual clubs there to do. That would be a huge part of it. And is there an element of streamlining the strategies? So, for example, would you start with your national strategy and then cascade that down to the regional level and say, well, this is where we're going, what are you doing to support it?
Very much so. And that's kind of been a push for some years now, and that the national body has been responsible for trying to create, first of all, it was its own national strategy, and then, hey guys, do you like this? Would you like to use some of it? And then, more recently, I think cricket's been really good at this with Martin Snedden, New Zealand Cricket, one sport, trying to create, a strategy that is not for New Zealand cricket, but a sport for cricket in New Zealand. And making that distinction. And most NSOs now do tend to make that distinction, so that their strategic process will be for the sport in the country. But there again, from a governance responsibility, the people that are sitting around the board also have responsibility for the organisation, for the board they're sitting on. So there is the national strategy that also needs to be for the national organisation, as well as the national strategy for the whole sport, that the national body would hope that the other regional entities would pick up. And that's the formalised collaborative governance process, that those other entities formally agree to that national strategy.
Right, that actually really nicely leads on to my next question, was about this conflict of duties. Because as you've said, if you're a director on an organisation, your duty is to act in the best interest of that organisation, not this group of organisations that are associated with you. So does that duty conflict, and how do you address that conflict of that need to, and looking back to 20 years ago when you had this parochialism and you had somebody that was voted on the national board from one region and then was out there waving the flag for their region and wasn't acting in the best interest of the organisation that was sitting on the board of. So this conflict exists. How do you overcome that?
And we'd be naive not to think that wouldn't create some conflict, and it is important to recognise. And again, that's the essence of collaborative governance. It calls that out. It says you have to govern your organisation in the way that you see best fit, because that's your role and responsibility as a director of that organisation. But we are, I think I use the word family or whānau because it is a bit like that. You are a sister or a brother, but we have a common parent, or we have a common purpose, a common existence, a common mission. There are heaps of overlaps in our DNA. What are those things that we can collaboratively work together on, and what are the things that you need to call out as being non-negotiable for in the best interests of your own organisation. If you think about a family as kids grow up and create their own families,
yes.
and the cascading effect of that, it's not. I think it's a helpful metaphor.
I'm not sure whether you'll know the answer to this question because it's quite a legal one, but I'll ask it anyway in case you do. In the corporate world, what we'll often have with subsidiary structures is essentially permission in the constitution of the subsidiary to act in the best interests of the parent.
Nice.
Is there an equivalent of that?
No, I haven't. You're right. I'm not the best person to ask that, but that sounds very cool, and I haven't come across that in the sport context.
It'd be interesting to see whether it's possible.
Nice.
Isn't it? I'll have to look into that
one. Make a note of that.
Yeah, I'll get back on track. What role does communication and information sharing play in successful collaborative governance, and can you share an example maybe?
It's a great question because it sits at the heart of this whole thing. It's all very well to talk in these terms and the principles of it, but it comes down to, okay, so how are we going to make this work on the ground on a day-to-day basis? And I think one of the reasons that collaborative governance can take hold, has taken hold, and has a bright future, is because of the way that we now had communication one-to-many. Back in the old days, I talking about Tennis New Zealand a lot. I used to work at New Zealand Tennis. It was in those days the other way around. I was at age 21. I just come back from tennis scholarship in the States, and I wanted to work in my national body. I remember putting the letters to all the regional and clubs in pigeonholes. The snail mail stuff, right? So the way that we can now communicate one to many, and obviously all of the other communication mechanisms, mean that we can bring the idea of collaborative governance together, because it takes a lot of communication to make it work. Obviously, face-to-face and relationships sits at the heart of that as well, not just... the technology is a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because yes, it's really easy to go out to everybody at once. It means that everyone's got full inboxes. So you have to make sure you've got multiple channel communication to make that effective. And not to just rest on that point, but then to bring in the incredibly important value of the whakawhanaungatanga, the relationships that the whole thing rests on. Which we can do, but then the challenge of that is the roll through, the cycling of governance positions and people. You just build great relationships, and then people cycle through 3 to 6 years or 6 to 10 years. And
is there an organisation where you've seen that communication work very well in a federated sports structure?
Well, I think we all have our challenges. All of the national bodies have their challenge. My usual go-to is cricket.
Right.
And I mean, the reason I'm hesitating is because it's a really tough nut to crack.
It really is,
I know there's still challenges through the New Zealand cricket system with the sense of they didn't communicate that to us, and we didn't know about that, and we feel left out, and that still occurs.
Yes.
But I think the work that New Zealand cricket does in bringing its people together, to creating national governance forums, regional forums, a whole range of different ways that bring its community together to have these face-to-face hui and relationship building exercises to work through the nutty issues of its national strategy or whatever it is. And the other example I've talked about a bit, but I know Tennis New Zealand also works really hard to have these national governance forums. We've got one on Friday coming up actually, and that is all about spending the time to bring your people together to help you work through what the challenges are, but also to obviously help the other part of collaborative governance is the co-design and strategy. So it's not just the national body creating the strategy; it's the co-design and the strategic process, which is part of
interesting.
governance.
You talked before about the value of technology and the one-to-many communications, but both examples that you gave of where it's done very well face-to-face.
Yeah.
So the personal relationships are definitely strongest, aren't they?
Yeah.
To what extent do issues of power imbalance hinder effective collaboration? Do you still see scenarios where you've got one or two players that are stronger than others and throw their weight around a bit too much?
Yeah, very much so. So I'll give an example of some of the work we've been doing recently with golf in Australia. It's a really interesting example because we're studying the process of it moving from a federated system to dabbling in the idea of collaborative governance. And where they've got to is instead of working at the governance level to work through these nutty issues of collaboration, they've decided to go to a unitary management system.
Right.
So there's enormous efficiencies within the states to share their management resource shared services at the management level, not the governance level.
Right.
So that you maintain the governance structures, the boards of each of the state.
Yeah.
But
you've got one management team reporting to all of those states.
Correct.
Oh, by the way, the CEO of that organisation.
Yeah. So some of the states have bought into that, and some of them haven't.
Right.
I think there's a couple, the big ones, that haven't.
Interesting to see how that works out.
Yeah, it's a really interesting example of. Your question was around power imbalances, and typically in an NSO there'll be the big regions like the Auckland region or whatever. That has a different set of needs to a smaller region.
What sort of mechanisms can you put in place to get that balance back, to try and even that out?
Yeah, nice question. I think in the experience of the sports that I've kind of watched and worked with and researched, it is all about the communication process of a shared mission and a shared purpose. So coming back to, we are actually a family and we have a common and shared DNA, we have a common and shared mission and purpose. So if we agree on that, how do we then move forward with the
everyone's
power?
patting the walker in the same direction.
Yeah. Well, just the sense of, so what was our shared purpose again? Because it's there. It's absolutely there.
Yeah, very much. In sport, it's probably easier to find that shared purpose than anywhere else, right?
Yeah.
Well, sport and charities in many cases. Yes. How does organisational and national culture impact collective governance?
Oh, jeez. Question 8.
Save the best for last.
It's pretty fascinating, Because the sort of work I do is research work, is action research. So it means that I'm in there with the national bodies, in many cases working with the board to, in this case, to move toward a collaborative governance model, or so we're studying it while we're doing it, while it's happening, and there's real insight, and you learn about the real deep challenges of these great ideas, and what the enablers and what the barriers are. And for a while now, because I've worked with a range of different sports for a while now, I sort of have these kind of observations and hunches around the team sport versus the individual sport culture. And this is just kind of personal perspectives. It's not from a research point of view. But one of my hunches would be, I think the individual sport landscape is not as used to the idea of this
collaboration,
which is essentially, because I'm a tennis player. I grew up, in competition with that person across the other side of the net. My mission was to beat that person, and so this is a mindset that you create, and it takes a bit to reconsider the value sometimes of that. That perspective. So that's just a hunch. So, but it's a bit of a fun one from my point of view. But how does organisation and national culture impact collaborative? Hugely. You know what? I think you've said organisation culture, but one of the other things I've observed is how lucky we are to learn from Indigenous cultures. So I say Indigenous because I mean Māori and Pacific cultures in New Zealand. And, you know, my understanding is, you know, they're steeped in deep collectivism.
Yes. Deeply
understand the collective behaviours and relationships. And so we've got lots to learn in how those kinds of ethnic cultures, Indigenous cultures, can uplift and enhance the way that we might outplay our collaborative cultures and organisations.
So Māori governance is a topic that I'm dying to dig into, and yeah, I'm looking forward to having somebody to talk to about that for those reasons. Yeah, one final question for you. What advice would you give to a new director of a sports organisation within that collaborative context, within a federated structure?
I think I would... I think my piece of advice would be to value the perspective that someone might be coming from, even if it's potentially counter to the collaborative philosophy. So by that I mean what I said before, which is, you know, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, I think we're incredibly privileged to have so many committed volunteers and people wanting to give their time to sport governance, and so committed to wanting to make their organisation work. I think we should be valuing that. And so to come run roughshod over that by saying, oh yeah, you need to be far more nationally, you know, whatever it is in terms of, you know, talking down the parochial kind of representative mindset.
Yes.
Yeah, there's been issues with that, and yeah, we need to back off that, and yeah, we need to think about, you know, how we sit within the family of organisations, but to devalue that and not to appreciate the time and emotional connection that people feel to sport would be a mistake. So yeah, that would be my piece of advice.
Cool. Lesley, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciated the conversation.
Cool.
I'll look forward to catching up again soon, talking on another topic, I think, and we'll see you next episode.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you for watching this episode of Governance Bites. We have more episodes on YouTube and your favourite podcast channel, where I interview directors and experts on various topics relating to boards of directors and governance. We'd love to see you back, and please like, subscribe, and share the videos and podcasts.